Top 10 Astonishing Facts About America's First Ladies. The part of the First Lady is a novel position. Every lady who has involved the informal office has made it their own, taking on everything from facilitating visitors, holding public interviews, handling social issues, or affecting pioneers in the background. Be that as it may, there might be some weird realities you haven't caught wind of a portion of America's most conspicuous ladies. Regardless of whether it's joining a furnished watch during a Chinese defiance-breaching spirits in the White House, or being blamed for killing the president. These are a portion of their most stunning stories. 10. Dolly Madison had an honorary seat in Congress. Dolly Madison characterized what a first woman would be, facilitating visitors and tending to social issues. She lobbied for her better half, facilitated occasions with single President Thomas Jefferson, raised assets for Lewis and Clark, and broadly spared the renowned representation of George Washington from the White House when the British consumed D.C. in the War of 1812. She was even the principal resident to communicate something specific by broadcast. Dolly Madison characterized what a first woman would be, facilitating visitors and tending to social issues. She lobbied for her better half, facilitated occasions with single President Thomas Jefferson, raised assets for Lewis and Clark, and broadly spared the renowned representation of George Washington from the White House when the British consumed D.C. in the War of 1812. She was even the principal resident to communicate something specific by broadcast. 9. Lou Hoover patrolled her home in China during the Boxer Rebellion. Lou Hoover was a pony riding, roller skating, design and nature buff familiar with 5 dialects. She wedded her geography cohort and future President Herbert Hoover in 1899, and the lovebirds took off for China. Mrs. Hoover immediately learned Chinese, a language the couple would utilize when they needed to impart secretly before visitors at the White House. At that point in 1900, the Boxer Rebellion started, a contention in which numerous Chinese brutally assaulted outsiders due to pressures over expanding Western effect on the nation. Mrs. Hoover treated shot injuries, fabricated blockades, and rode through the region on her bike with a gun, watching with Western soldiers. She would need to assist by and by when her family was in London during the beginning of World War I, and she was asked by the U.S. envoy to arrange help for the dislodged. She turned into a boss for Belgium while they were involved. In the U.S., she coordinated the American Red Cross canteen escort service to get back injured American fighters. Later in her life, she assisted with the establishing of the Girl Scouts. During the Great Depression, which her better half battled to control, she made normal radio stations to the American public. It was a day-to-day existence brimming with outdoorsmanship and compassion for the spouse of one of America's most unsuccessful presidents. 8. Mary Todd Lincoln held seances in the White House. In the result of the Common War, when 750,000 American lives were lost, there were numerous families the nation over edgy to associate with the great beyond. There was a blast of mysticism, or the possibility that one can speak with the dead, particularly well known with the privileged. Mary Todd Lincoln had lost her mom, 3 of her kids, and her significant other, executed before her. However, it was her child Willie's passing in 1862 that appeared to negatively affect her. He was 11 when he passed on from typhoid fever, which sent his folks into a profound sadness and season of segregation and grieving. The request of the Common War in the long run drew out the president, who tied a dark lace around his cap in recognition of his child, which stayed there until his own awkward end. Mrs. Lincoln started to visit with a gathering of mediums called the Lauries to attempt to contact him. She even facilitated seances in the Red Room of the White House, with President Lincoln in participation for a few of them. She appeared to breathe easy because of them, keeping in touch with a family member. Willie lives. He comes to me consistently and remains at the foot of the bed with the very sweet cute grin that he generally has had. You can dream of the solace this gives me. Mrs. Lincoln even visited a profound picture taker who snapped a picture that apparently demonstrated the spooky outline of the late president remaining over her. Indeed, even today, there are gossipy tidbits that the apparition of Willie, his sibling Eddie, and their dad actually frequent the White House today. 7. Lucretia Garfield nursed her husband back to health after an assassination attempt. The romantic tale of Lucretia and James Garfield isn't the smoothest or most sentimental one throughout the entire existence of U.S. presidents and first women. He wrote in his journals that she exhausted him. She was profoundly resentful about his infidelity, and doubted his thought processes in wedding her, saying that she trusted it was more out of obligation than adoration. They were separated for the early piece of the marriage as he went in the Union Armed Force and for the State Assembly. Be that as it may, difficulty would bring them closer. In 1881, however, Mrs. Garfield was hit with serious intestinal sickness and nearly passed on. President Garfield was overpowered with this, and took over a greater amount of the child care and instruction of their youngsters. At the point when she recuperated marginally, she chose to make a trip to the Jersey Shore to ideally mend in the outside air. What they didn't know was that an endeavored professional killer, Charles Guiteau, was holding up at the train station to execute the president when he took her to the train. Be that as it may, when he saw the slight condition of the principal woman, he held off, stressed over how seeing the homicide would impact her. On July 2, Guiteau shot James Garfield, and Mrs. Garfield surged back to Washington to mind from him, just scarcely recuperated herself. The nation breathed easy in light of the fearless face that she appeared, and her quiet courage when the president died in September, with his significant other close by. After his passing, Congress attempted to pay his male specialist twofold the compensation of his female specialist. However, Mrs. Garfield stepped in and guaranteed that the two specialists got an equivalent installment of $1,000. 6. Florence Harding was accused of murder. The passing of President Warren Harding came as a stun to the country. He was just 58 years of age, very much voyage, apparently solid and sound. It was partially through his term, and he was a famous president. His better half Florence had consistently been working in the background to help his vocation, since his beginning as paper proofreader. She even once told columnists, "I have just a single genuine side interest, my better half." But at that point, President Harding left on a talking visit the nation over called the Voyage of Understanding. On a visit to Alaska, President Harding turned out to be incredibly drained and confounded. He passed out a few times in transit back to Washington. After 3 days on August 2, 1923, he passed on at a lodging in San Francisco while his better half was perusing to him. She told specialists he had a seizure and afterward passed. It was initially recommended that he may have been harmed from awful crab meat. Specialists at that point accepted he had extreme pneumonia, and ultimately administered it as a stroke. Yet, Mrs. Harding began to act dubiously, treating him promptly, rejecting a post-mortem examination, and devastating some of his papers. Mrs. Harding passed on just a year after her better half. After her passing, resigned FBI specialist Gaston Means distributed a book in 1930 blaming her for killing Harding to shield his inheritance from outrages of issues and payoff. Later it was uncovered the book was generally created. It is currently accepted that the president kicked the bucket of a cardiovascular failure. 5. Eleanor Roosevelt forced newspapers to hire female reporters, and may have had an affair with one. Eleanor Roosevelt is one of the nation's most celebrated first ladies, and has for some time been viewed as a ladies' privileges symbol. One lesser-known part of her activism is the manner by which she demanded that lone female journalists would be permitted at her public interviews. This guaranteed that any paper who needed admittance to her must have a lady on staff. Over her significant other's long term, she facilitated 348 gatherings, first talking about family issues, and afterward on growing to more profound policy-centered issues and getting unique visitors. This included female individuals from President Roosevelt's organization and unfamiliar dignitaries like Song Mei-ling, spouse of Chinese President Chiang Kai-shek. One of the female columnists, Lorena Hickok, may have been nearer than simply a partner to the First Lady, or closer than even an old buddy. Hickok was doled out to cover Mrs. Roosevelt in 1932. And she ultimately surrendered her situation to move into the White House in the room nearby to the First Lady. The two traded a great many letters, at times even 2 per day. With one statement from Hickok perusing, "I need to put my arms around you and kiss you at the side of your mouth," and another from Roosevelt, "I long to hold you close. Your ring is of extraordinary solace. I take a gander at it and figure she adores me, or I wouldn't be wearing it." The ladies stayed close their whole lives. 4. Elizabeth Monroe saved Lafayette's wife from execution. Elizabeth Monroe wedded future President James Monroe when she was just 17 of 1786. The couple initially lived in Virginia, yet went as the future president started his political profession. In 1794, President Washington sent them to Paris during the French upset, as James was designated U.S. clergyman to France. There they turned out to be popular. Mrs. Monroe took on European style and social traditions, and acquired herself the sentimental epithet of La Beauté Américaine. The Monroes assisted with building informal communities for their young nation in European circles, and their rich perspectives heated up unfamiliar acknowledgement of the United States and its new type of majority-rule government. Marquis de Lafayette was an American legend, one of just 8 individuals in history to be allowed privileged citizenship of the United States. His work in the Revolutionary War was instrumental in guaranteeing triumph against Britain. The Monroes would find the opportunity to help reimburse the courtesy during the warmth of the contention in France. When Lafayette's significant other Adrien de Noailles de Lafayette was being held in jail anticipating execution by guillotine, Mrs. Monroe demanded visiting her in jail, and this informal intercession clarified that the Americans would not be satisfied if any damage were to gone to her. After this visit, Adrien was delivered. 3. Edith Bowling Wilson ran the country and was descended from Pocahontas. Edith Wilson was a novel first woman in quite a while than one. For one, she was the incredible, extraordinary granddaughter of Pocahontas, making her 480th Native American. In any case, she ensured individuals thought about that association, regardless of coming from one of the most established English families in Virginia. The Bowling family had fallen into destitution after the Civil War liberated their slaves. All through her childhood, Edith was rejected from high society. Her key to reputation prior to turning out to be first woman was by guaranteeing this legacy. after widow Edith wedded single man Woodrow Wilson in 1915. This reality was a fascinating friendly exchange at occasions. Be that as it may, Edith's more significant inheritance was as the informal First Lady leader of the United States. From the second she wedded the office-holder president, she had the opportunity to work helping him as the U.S. entered World War I. He gave her admittance to grouped war archives and she sat in as a consultant in gatherings. At that point in 1919, President Wilson had a stroke that debilitated him. The First Lady guaranteed everybody that he essentially required rest. She took any reminders or papers for him into his space to be investigated, and returned them with notes. She terminated the Secretary of State, who held a bureau meeting without the president. She even asked a British diplomat to leave for good after he would not fire a guide who had poked a profane fun at her. She continued like this for a very long time. Albeit openly, she demanded she never settled on any official choices. 2. Anna Harrison's packed bags never made it. At the point when youthful Anna Sims met warrior William Henry Harrison on a visit to her sister in Kentucky, there was a moment association. Anna's dad had a problem with their relationship on the grounds that William was not talented in any exchange other than battle, in spite of the way that he had been a fighter himself. Yet the two wedded subtly in 1795. In the wake of seeing the glad couple, her dad ultimately adjusted his perspective. She immediately had 10 kids and taught them on the Indiana outskirts, in spite of her childhood being that of a beachfront tip-top. In 1840, William won the administration. However, Anna needed to remain at home as she recuperated from a disease. Their little girl-in-law, a widow Jane Harrison, took on the First Lady facilitating obligations incidentally until Mrs. Harrison could make the long excursion securely. In any case, before Anna had even wrapped up gathering her packs, she got destroying news. In April of 1841, President Harrison kicked the bucket following a solitary month in office from pneumonia. Congress consented to offer Mrs. Harrison a benefits identical to the president's compensation, and she lived until the age of 88. President Harrison was the principal U.S. president to bite the dust in office, and the one with the briefest term. 1. Mary Arthur McElroy was an anti-suffragette. Chester Arthur went into his unexpected administration after the death of President Garfield as a single man. His darling spouse Ellen passed on of pneumonia in 1880. And the lamenting president would look at a recolored glass window that he gave in her honor at a congregation he could see from the White House. The president's more youthful sister, Mary Arthur McElroy, would come to D.C. during the bustling season, to go about as the official entertainer. In spite of the fact that President Arthur never authoritatively allowed her the title of First Lady, she was popular during her occasions. Be that as it may, when Mrs. McElroy got back to her family home in Albany, New York, during the slow time of year, she went about as an individual from the Albany Association opposed to women's suffrage. Indeed, Albany was a specific solid hold for the counter-testimonial development. The gathering initially met in 1894, and again in 1915 and 1917. They sent a statement from one of their leaflets read, "There are still ladies enough left outside of the club of female fermenters, who accept that lady can generally accomplish her best work at home," to which a suffragette distribution reacted, "If a lady can generally accomplish her best work at home, for what reason does the Anti-Suffrage Association send Mrs. Cranach to lead a political mission many miles from Albany?" Obviously, the counter-testimonial development finished in 1920. When the 19th Amendment was passed giving American ladies the option to cast a ballot.